Hello and welcome to this edition of the Championship Talk podcast. We've watched the first round of fixtures. It was a great round of fixtures, a lot of surprises. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Paul O'Toole, and joined with me this week for making a once only appearance is my co-host Thomas Falco.
Hello.
Before we get into the news, there is only a little bit of news to cover because obviously we covered a big chunk last week. How did you think last season went? Because obviously I did last week's podcast. I gave my thoughts. I did the stats and whatever. How do you think last season went? What were your highlights?
Well, in a nutshell, really, at the top, I think the three teams who went up were the teams that deserve to go up, which ultimately doesn't... You know, with the playoffs, that can be a bit of a lottery, but you can't argue that Brentford didn't deserve to go up after what happened to them last season, and their sort of model over the last few years as well, and their consistency and quality of player. So congratulations, Brentford. Be good to see how they fare in the Premiership. As far as the bottom goes, a bit unsavoury with all the uncertainty that went on going into the last sort of week of pre-season as well, not knowing what would happen and the two sets of fixtures coming out, etc, etc. Feel gutted for Wycombe because they left it too late. I was listening back to a few of our podcasts over my sort of break away from the podcast because of work, and we were saying that Wycombe were growing into it, and hopefully they didn't leave it too late, and ultimately they did. Bit sad to see that they've lost a couple of their good players, but good for us to see their better players this season. Hopefully the affairs involving Derby County improve, because speaking as a Forest fan, it could be easy for me to sit here and say it's fantastic as happening, but I don't think that at all, because I am a football fan ultimately, and all the best for Derby and their struggles at the moment, and hopefully they can sort themselves out. The usual suspects. We lost Rotherham again, didn't we? Sad to see Sheffield Wednesday go down, but they're giving a good fist of it. They've done some good recruitment going into League One, as we'll talk about probably Christmas time. But ultimately, it was good to see football back, wasn't it? And we've seen from the first weekend of this sort of season what a difference the fans make, and I think now fans are back in the stadiums. We've got our proper football back, haven't we? And on the back of a brilliant Euro 2000 and 20, sorry, rather than the Euro 2021 as it should have been, we're back to the proper stuff, and it's brilliant to sit down, talk to you about it, talk to our lovely listeners about it, and be making the notes. Brilliant to be back, mate.
Absolutely, and obviously we'll get into the games on the main podcast. The one thing I'd say about the games last season, I think will be for most people, other than the three teams that went up and the three teams that went down, I think the last season will be probably unfairly, but will be forgettable because there was no fans in the stadium, because a lot of the drama that took place with no crowds, piped in crowd noise. And I think that's going to make last season, people are going to want to almost forget about it, unless you're one of the six clubs that it had massive ramifications for. This season, the first round of fixtures, just every game that I saw felt more epic because there was fans.
Definitely.
Did you feel that?
I did indeed, and I was listening to quite a few of the views on sort of certain podcasts and other radio shows, and reading the views online as well. The atmosphere at Kenilworth Road, probably one of the smallest crowds, you'll tell me as we go along, the smallest crowds of the weekend. The most electric atmosphere at times as well, just watching the highlights of that. Incredible, and it is marvellous what a difference the fans make, not only to the standard of play and the reaction of players, but also the standard of refereeing decisions, as we'll get into later on as well.
Yeah, I kind of hadn't picked up on that until it was pointed out that I think it was the first game, for the first game we watched, or may have been in the Sunday afternoon game, there was some quite feisty tackles that perhaps without a crowd would have got red cards. We didn't actually see a single red card all weekend, and arguably Mitrovic could have been sent off after 30 seconds, which we'll get into. But I think the crowd being there really made a difference, and just the enjoyment from watching it on TV made it more exciting. And I think this season already feels better than last season, which is one game in just feels ridiculous saying. But without those fans, it just, some of them stadiums felt really empty. It felt like we were watching training ground games, and it just feels like, 2020 to 2021 season has been and gone, and now we get proper football back, which is really, really good and exciting to see. The one thing that isn't exciting to see, and we've kind of put off talking about this subject because obviously it's a subject we've covered quite a lot on this podcast. Unfortunately, it feels like in the 3 years that we've done this podcast, this racism in football keeps rearing its head almost on a frequent basis. The EFL reaffirms support for players and staff members taking a knee before ahead of the start of the new season. The Championship, League 1, League 2 seasons begin, and the EFL confirms that it still supports the simple act of a protest against racism and inequality. And obviously there are some players that are deciding not to take the knee, and that's their personal preference. But obviously we had what happened in the Euros, and it was quite sad. It was sad to think that it was going back to football in the 80s and the 70s. It was quite sad to think that we were, we knew that it was a problem in certain grounds, but it was just highlighted on a massive scale. All the stuff that we've been talking around social media just seemed to sort of explode, and it's something that we do need to talk about every week to make sure that it constantly becomes a non-acceptable way for people to behave, and where they think that to chant racist abuse, yell racist abuse is acceptable in any way, shape or form. And if you keep talking about it means that people are constantly having to think about their actions, it's sad that we're in that state of affairs, but it's good that there's some action being taken on almost a game-by-game basis. What were your thoughts?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, to be perfectly honest with you. I did raise my eyebrow because my tablet went off at the same time, so apologies if that went off over your very passionate and spot-on comments on the subject. I think we've got to get to the stage now where taking the knee is sort of something that should be applauded, but it also should be down to the individual, whether it be the club or the player's approach, whether they want to do that or not. Someone taking the knee or someone not taking the knee does not automatically mean they're against equality in football, because I know some people, and when people first stopped taking the knee, I look at the example of Lyle Taylor, for example. Of course I would do because he plays for my team, but he didn't take the knee because he said it was the political aspect of it, and when you look deeper into the BLM movement, he didn't think necessarily that taking a knee was the right thing to do. I mean, taking a knee is a start, isn't it? But it's still racism in football is still prevalent. And it really shouldn't be in 2021. The fact we're still talking about this week in, week out is ridiculous, really, isn't it? So we've got a long way to go.
Think of it this way, right? So in 100 years, okay, humans as a society have put people in space. You can now pay to go into outer space. They're talking about putting people on Mars, and yet we're still in a world where people judge people by the colour of their skin. When you can come that far as a civilization, and you can transcend your own planet, yet we've still got people that feel it's acceptable to judge people on the colour of their skin, to yell abuse, to use social media for its supposed anonymity, to provoke a reaction, and they think that's acceptable. And I think that's something that is frustrating. I get what you say about the political aspect, and I have heard that comment, and I can understand that stance. I think the benefit to it, again, it's everyone's choice, but I think the benefit to at least talking about it is before every game, before we talk about football, before we talk about what's gone in the games, we see a symbol of what racism shouldn't be in football. The racism shouldn't be in football, and I think that's what it takes. And I think that where fans are booing the taking the knee, ultimately you could boo the political aspect of it. I get it, but by booing the symbol, you're either against stopping racism or you're not. Political views are expressed in a voting booth. Political views are expressed in protests, etc. But when you're looking at creating an inclusive environment to watch a sport, I think that it unfortunately at times brings out the worst in society, and I think that that's the saddest part of this. And when I look at the Euros and what happened to England in the Euros and what the backlash of that was just unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. And I'm glad the EFL have come out and reiterated their position, because I do think as an organisation they've got a lot more to do. I think they've got a lot more to do to promote education as well as diversity in boardrooms in football clubs, in management in football clubs, because I think that ultimately plays a massive part. But I think it was a good statement to come out with. And I know this is a subject that some people probably don't want to talk about, but we felt it was right to air our views given what happened over the summer, and it was right that both of us got a chance to talk about that. I think that's a fair comment, isn't it?
It is, yes. And ultimately, if I was in a very privileged position to be able to play professional football, I'd have no problems in taking the knee before a game just to make a point, sort of basically, because it's wrong. It should not be happening, whether it be race, sexuality, views, etc., etc. Everyone should be included, and the fact it's still going on and we're still having to talk about it is ridiculous.
Absolutely, and it's getting monotonous because it's becoming almost a weekly subject, which was, which takes us away from what we actually wanted to look at, which is the Championship. Now, going on to the Euros, there was something that I didn't pick out. 7th highest represented league in the Euros was the Championship. I was stunned when I heard that, but I don't know why I was so surprised. The Championship has a massive core of great players, and from all across Europe, and there was a 7th most represented league, which I think was really, really good. We're going to move on to the transfers. So obviously when I talked last time around the transfers, I commented on how little money had been recouped and how even less had been spent. Obviously those figures have gone up a little bit. There's been a couple of big transfers that we're just going to mention. So far, departures, players leaving the league, 238, which is quite a high number when you consider it's only for 43 million pounds, and that's only reported sums, so there's some transfers that are unreported. Total money spent on 176 players was 27 million, so far net gain in terms of transfers 16 million. I think you've got the biggest transfer so far in terms of value from West Brom.
Yes, when we look into what's happened, I did mention in my little text that I, believe it or not, Paul, I actually did record you a 10-minute reasoning of my views, but my phone kept going off in the background as I was recording it, so I just thought, sod it, I'll do it in a text. Yes, I did allude to them losing one of their better players, and we heard over the last 48 hours or so that Matheus Pereira has left the club. I've got my little transfer tablet in front of me, and he's on page 1, and I'm currently on page 2, so I couldn't tell you where he's gone, but he's gone to Saudi Arabia. Bear with me 1 minute, Paul, sorry.
He's gone to Al Hilal Riyadh.
Yes, he has, and they play in the Saudi Professional League. And yes, the fact he's gone for that much as well. I was watching a very interesting video on YouTube about he turned down West Ham, and he was actually getting offered more by West Ham in terms of wages than he was by Hilal. But the difference is, you don't pay tax in Saudi Arabia on your wages, so he ended up getting paid more ultimately by going to Saudi Arabia than going to West Ham, and he was open and honest about that in a statement.
Let's be honest. The weather's better.
Well, and that as well, but he was open and honest in a statement. He said that this will make him financially secure at the age of 25. At least he's open and honest about the reasonings for going.
Yeah,
so absolutely. All credit to him. Apparently he wasn't happy at West Brom, made his views clear as you put in our season preview, and he's made the move. The very best of luck to him. Hopefully he can raise the profile of the Saudi Professional League.
It's also been reported that Adam Armstrong has agreed, or Blackburn have agreed a fee for Adam Armstrong, reported to be in around 15 million. Obviously, that's only speculation, but that is being reported on all major websites. He's going to be a loss, but are you really surprised if he does go?
No, because he is obviously, in terms of stats and goals, he is a Premier League class player. And very interestingly, I can't remember the website, it might have been BBC Sport on social media, pointed out that his career is actually the mirror opposite to Alan Shearer's so far, in the fact that he started off at Newcastle. He ended off at Newcastle, didn't he? Alan Shearer was at Blackburn and started off at Southampton. This is the other way round. So yeah, that's very interesting to see that. But no, the very best of luck to him. We hate seeing good players leave the Championship, but he's earned his chance to go to the Premier League, and he's obviously he's got tough boots to fill with Danny Ings, obviously leaving in the last week or so, going to Villa, which came a bit out of the blue.
I did, absolutely, and you're right. I think that's obviously going to be their replacement, and I think they're getting a good player. I think Blackburn have got not adequate replacements in terms of the same level, but they have replacements already made in their squad. So I think Blackburn's challenges last season weren't necessarily scoring goals, they're probably keeping them at the other end. So Blackburn, I don't think will be too. I don't think that'll affect them too much by losing Adam Armstrong, even though he scored a hatful of goals last season. All of them come in the first half of the season. I do think they've got other players, Ben Brereton Diaz, the Chile international, which just seems weird, but to the Chile international. They've got other players that will fill his boots. I don't think they'll score as many goals in terms of stature. In terms of transfers, we're going to do all of the transfers once the window closes. So rather than Thomas go through every single transfer week after week, which gets a bit monotonous for you, me, we're going to do a roundup, and then what we're going to add to it is who we think's done the best business. So once we've rounded up all the transfers at the end of the season, we are going to cover all the big ones. So all the sort of £1 million plus deals we will just mention week after week, because obviously those players are going to play a big part in the next couple of rounds of fixtures. But then we'll round up every transfer, under 10s, all that, all the research that goes into it. He loves that bit. The Women's Super League, all of those transfers will be rounded up by Thomas, and then we'll work out who's done the best business. Because I think some clubs have done some really good business, and I think some clubs probably haven't done some great business in that they've let a lot of players go and not recruit them. But we'll talk about Derby in a minute. So thank you all for watching. We will be rounding up all of the games on our main podcast. It's on any podcast feed that you subscribe to. If you want to support the show, hit us a thumbs up, leave us a comment. We really do appreciate all the comments from everyone that's left us a comment. It's been really good to get back and suddenly receive, our first podcast was well received. It was even better for me because I recorded it solo, so it was really nice to have that appreciation. And we shall catch you all next week. That's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And we'll speak to you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.